Oh, thank you very much, Mark, and great to be here today. Really appreciate the opportunity. And I think I will say that, I've had some very interesting ideas put in front of you from both Mark and Claire. So I'm going to try and build on that a little with my slides. So I was asked today to take a very practical approach to what can you do tomorrow. So I'm calling this session The Art of the Possible. And of course, it will continue to change, but we do have some interesting ideas today. Next slide, please. So here's what I'm going to cover. What is circular procurement related to IT, and why buying as a service is so key to the circular economy. You saw those 5 business models that Joanne introduced, and Claire certainly hammered that one home, that the single biggest thing you can do is to extend product lifetimes, and that is really through buying as a service. I'm going to talk a little bit about HP's carbon neutral managed print services, another way to help you lower your footprint. And then we also have some results of an 18-month pilot that Green Economy Canada has been running on sustainable IT procurement, and we've got some results to share with you. Next slide, please. But I would be remiss if I did not tell you about a wonderful new report that is coming out next week on the 25th. I was on the expert panel. This was commissioned by ECCC, Environment and Climate Change Canada. And the report is an expert panel report on what are the potential opportunities and challenges for a circular economy in Canada. So really want to let you all know that this is coming. It's a very large report, but it certainly gave me an opportunity to look at this from a pan-Canadian perspective with a very wide range of experts here. And so I found it a very interesting process, and it'll be good reading for all of you. It's a very large report, though, so it takes some time. So in my last session, we used this definition of circular procurement. And this is coming from Bob Willard. I forgot to put his name on the slide here, but the grandfather of Canadian sustainability. So the first thing is obviously obtaining best value for money. And traditionally, that's what we have been focused on in the procurement function. My question here is, does TCO, and by here, not TCO certified that Claire was just talking about, but total cost of ownership, and just make sure there's no confusion there. I just want to make sure my camera's on because I'm not seeing my camera there.
Yep, we can see you.
Okay,
yep.
Great. Okay. So I would argue that, remember Claire said that 7 to 80% of IT is typically in the supply chain. So the IT industry has done a really good job of making very energy efficient products. So a traditional TCO calculation doesn't really help you. It probably does more if you're purchasing print because you've got some consumables in there, but less so than other product categories potentially. Excuse me. So the most circular procurement is about procuring the most sustainable services and goods. And I always flip that because we want to really focus on this. So how are we measuring at the product level or the service level? Obviously, we're going to use eco-labels and company disclosures. And the reason I push there is because the next one is from the most sustainable suppliers. And this is particularly important because any company can have one hero product, but we're talking about moving the market. And the market needs to focus on what the companies are doing in their supply chains, upstream and downstream. So it's a full value chain. And so this becomes a question about transparency, ambition. We've just come out of the COP conference, and a lot of people are very disappointed that we weren't being nearly ambitious. This is a tipping point. And setting high goals, and I'll give you an example, HP, net zero by 2040. That's ahead of where our government is and ahead of where many of our suppliers are. So how do we pull our suppliers to be doing more work sooner? Because we know action needs to happen sooner. And then some external recognition is another way, besides the eco-labels, of really ensuring that you're working with leading companies that are trying to push. And then what I think is perhaps the most important one for this audience in terms of public procurement is your organization's stated purpose and strategic goals. I think it was Calgary City Council yesterday, I saw the news, had declared a climate emergency. How is that reflected in how you buy? If we know from a technology perspective, and everybody buys technology, that 80% of the impact is in the supply chain and you're not requiring better performance in that supply chain, you're missing the mark. So we also need to think about, we have carbon goals, but we also need to think about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We have as a country some pretty aggressive goals there by 2030. This is a short time frame to be really working on those. Next slide, please. So sorry, can we go back? I am using Claire's slide again. TCO do some wonderful work in really stressing this, 80% in manufacturing. The other statistic that they have is that if you can add 2 years of life to an average PC, you'll reduce the carbon footprint by 30%. What you're doing is spreading that embedded carbon in the manufacturing across more of its life. And I would argue that many people feel uncomfortable. We see this with customers, oh, I don't want to keep older technology. It doesn't mean that you have to keep that technology. What it means is you have to ensure that it gets to a second life quickly. The longer a piece of technology sits around in a closet, in a storeroom, the less likely it is to be able to be reused. So again, if you buy as a service, the vendor like HP can take it back and refurbish it, get it ready for a second life, put a warranty on it, make sure it's data wiped, and we can get it out to a second life faster. So that's another element of where buying as a service really, really helps. Next slide, please. I showed this in my last presentation, but I just want to hammer this home. We believe this is the first time this was ever done using life cycle assessment, which is the best tool we have to measure impacts across a broad range of sustainability issues. We compared buying as at retail or buying and owning your product versus buying it as a service. And you can see here, we were very surprised by this data. In every category, there is a lower impact, which makes sense when you think about, but we've proved it. And you can go and have a look at this white paper. It's available online too. So just a quick word about HP. Next slide, please. We want to be the world's most sustainable and just technology company. Just meeting carbon targets is not enough. We know that societal ills need to be fixed, like the digital divide. And the power of the information technology industry is that we have a lot of resources to help governments meet those goals. And we really hope that by setting a bold, ambitious goal like this, our competitors will also step up. So you can see a virtuous cycle here of trying to lift the whole industry. But this really relies on procurement to send a signal into the marketplace as well. We do this because we've always done it. We're a purpose-driven company, but many of our competitors are not. And in order to really push them to keep coming along with us on some of this leadership work, procurement is the key lever here. So I'm very happy that we have so many people on the line today listening here. So let's have a look at, next slide, please, what it would take for a company like HP to get there. We have to be focusing on climate action. We have to be focused on human rights. Claire mentioned about the people who are building the products that we all use. And of course, from our perspective on a community side, it really is about digital equity. And you can see the UN Sustainable Development Goals below there that we're trying to work on. But how does that play into a circular economy strategy? Next slide, please. I've already covered this, but it's really about making products, as Claire said, at the design phase, designing products to be maintainable and upgradable, not glued together, offering as a service, offering to be able to reuse and refurbish products, and only then taking back and recovering those materials. So those three things are very important before we get to recycling. And I've put some key RFX questions in there, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about RFX questions in a second. So let's just look at, next slide, please, why technology procurement is so critical. And I've heard a lot of people talk about, if you're a procurement professional and you're trying to get started in sustainable procurement, where might you want to start? I would argue that technology is a good place to start because it has such an opportunity. So we now have the Internet of Things. It enables you to leverage the power of technology to do many things, and data is, of course, an important thing. We are all, regardless of which organization you're in, we're all being required by our stakeholders, whether it's ratepayers, taxpayers, to produce data to show how we're progressing. You know, the big thing that came out of COP in Glasgow was okay, it's all right to have all these wonderful pronouncements, but really actions speak louder than words. So how do we measure what our impacts are and how do we show progress? Well, guess what? Technology can do that for you. And you can, if you're a procurement or IT professional, you can leverage this data to put directly into your organization's transparency and reporting, which is awesome because it takes the hard work out of it for you. And you should be asking your vendors to do this for you. And let's say you have an organization goal to cut costs. With this Internet of Things data and better IT data, you can specifically target those costs. Let's say color printing, for instance. You could say which department is now doing more color printing and can we get them to scale that back, for instance. And of course, managing for security during use and end of first life. Claire mentioned what a critical component of this. I was giving a presentation to some recyclers in Ontario recently, and they said, you know, many of our customers require us to destroy perfectly good technology that could be given a second and third life. And this is really, I call it a hangover from the days when data wiping wasn't a very sophisticated science. Today, it can be. You could do it yourself. HP gives away free software through our HP Refresh program to let you do this, and enables you to give that computer to somebody who really needs it. Drop it off at your local food bank, or for a business or a government, you can do lots of other things. So that data privacy thing is critical, but it shouldn't be an obstacle for getting that computer or printer to a second life. And of course, the tech industry has been working on sustainability as a whole for quite some time. So you can set a high bar and expect continuous improvement as the eco labels like TCO continue to be updated. EP was just updated, and you can expect the print one soon. It is critical that these eco labels get increased and the industry comes along and we continue to increase our performance. We have been working in the supply chain area for 20 years, so lots of work has been ongoing, and collectively we've been working on that too, so we can drive better and more. And the tech sector has the power to tackle many of our societal problems. The computer today is essential. You cannot learn without it. You cannot even today see a doctor without it. So the digital divide is an issue that all governments are trying to tackle, whether it's access to technology or access to the internet. But the tech industry can come with you, and I can think of many good examples where the tech industry is doing that. Encourage your vendors to do more. It doesn't just have to be governments that are doing this. And as we already mentioned, a variety of eco labels, make it an easy choice. They're a good baseline for you. Next slide, please. So just on that theme, I wanted to tell you about the fact that you can buy carbon neutral managed print services today, and I expect many of our competitors will be offering similar things as well. So we're able, with the Internet of Things and data, to assess, using our independently certified life cycle assessment data, assess what your footprint is, knowing from all of those materials, embedded carbon extraction, all the way through to the supplies that you're using and the paper. And you may know that HP just donated $80 million to WWF to help offset all of the paper that's going through all of HP's printers globally for the next 10 years. But we can do it specifically for you using Internet of Things data, and of course, counting in the carbon footprint of end of service, which is quite low when you actually look at the data. But the key thing here is that we will work with you to help you reduce your impact first, and then purchase offsets so that you can actually tell your employees and your stakeholders that you're carbon neutral. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that Green Economy Canada has been working on an 18-month pilot, just released today, the white paper. Encourage you to go and have a look at it. I'll show you the URL. One of the things I want to do is I want to say thank you to everybody who participated in this pilot. It's a big thing to step up and say, I want to be included in this and I want to try and learn more about how to do this. And we all learned as part of this process. So thank you to Green Economy for spearheading this. We helped support them with funding and some technical support. Next slide, please. So 10 broader public sector organizations participated in this pilot, and they learned a lot, as did we. They built knowledge and equipped the participants to really ask good questions and understand what does sustainable IT even look like. I think for me and for many of the participants, and what they said was the key learning was that collaboration between procurement, IT, and sustainability was critical. No one organization within a government or a business has all the information that you need to make good decisions here. And the key thing was that Green Economy developed suggested procurement criteria for their participants, and they certainly said that they were helpful. Next slide, please. So here are some of the guidelines, the key steps that Green Economy and their participants uncovered, that having an internal team, particularly with some leadership, is important. And we developed a self-assessment tool, which is now at that website. You can go and have a look at it yourself. Outside of the pilot here, I've actually shared it with some others. I had a higher education institution just last week telling me how helpful this tool was. They were shocked to see how low they scored, but it really gave them the idea of how much opportunity they have. Identifying those upcoming bids and to build the knowledge of the criteria that you could put in, and then also talking to your vendors. Many public servants are worried about sole sourcing, and so not understanding the art of the possible. As I said, the industry's been working on sustainability for quite some time, so you have a fair bit of options to engage with your vendors and see what they can already do. And as Claire mentioned, there's a lot of eco labels already out there, and we're not seeing them being very widely used in Canada today. So as a baseline, an eco label is a bare minimum and a really great start. Next slide, please. So I'll take a quick dive through here. I don't want to go into this in too much detail because obviously you can go and look at these yourself, but supplier transparency, for instance, how do you measure supplier transparency? And the way that Green Economy chose to focus on this, and I think HP is doing something similar in our guidance, is to look at two types of criteria in bid documents. That you have compulsory, those are bare minimums. And I would argue that eco labels, whichever you choose, are bare minimum. They set the baseline. But if your organization, like the federal government, has goals around post-consumer recycled plastic, for instance, then you need to specify those in there as well. But supplier transparency, simple one would be disclosure. So Carbon Disclosure Project, now known as CDP, how is your vendor disclosing to CDP? Are they being fair and transparent? Or are they on the naughty list of being requested by CDP to provide data that they're just not providing? Really encourage you to look at vendor ambition around their carbon goals, and the Science Based Targets Initiative is a key one there, because any goals are not just picked out of thin air, they're actually aligned with where we need to do to keep the planet to 1.5 degrees of warming. And we need everybody aligned on that. That should be a basic question in all of your procurement documents, not just your technology ones. Next slide, please. So those are the criteria on supplier performance. And here we have some for print. And you can see I've put in EPEAT as an eco label. You've got some information on the supplies that go in and on plastics. And of course, because printers use paper, even if you're not buying a vendor's paper, then you certainly want to think about the paper that you are using. And there is no excuse for not using an eco-labeled paper. I don't care which it is, but I would strongly recommend FSC, but 100% recycled is good, but make sure you're buying with an eco-label in mind. Next slide, please. And then on personal computers, again, understanding a little bit about your eco labels. So for EPEAT, for instance, Energy Star is a requirement of EPEAT. So you don't need to specify those two things together. But if you're asking for a product that uses a lot of energy, gaming devices, etc., they may not be able to meet Energy Star, in which case you do ask for the lowest energy consuming product and get that data from your vendor. So coming to the end here, next slide, please. I love this statement here that sustainable procurement, circular procurement is a superpower. You have the power to really drive the circular economy, and I really encourage you to go and check out the resources at that website. And next slide, please. HP also has some guidance for you. I'd encourage you to print out the full guide there. It is intended to be a reference manual for you. It has background information on all the eco labels you might want to look at, along with some information on supply chain transparency, greenwashing, things that you may just need to handily refer to. And of course, we have the print, supplies, and PC criteria. And last slide is to say thank you very much. I'm hoping we're going to get some good questions and discussion